Welcome to Perspectives. I'm Terry Bowers, sitting in for Sam Jones. It's always a privilege to sit in on an interview for him, but today is extra special. Our guest is author, historian, and voice actor, an all-around awesome human, Michael Wallis.
Yeah.
It is such an honor to get to see you again.
The pleasure is entirely all mine.
And when you came in, I started to do the math on how long it had been and since I interviewed you on a set like this.
Yes.
And I decided I didn't want to do that math anymore. It was too hard.
Yes, everything is now a long time ago, yes.
And so it's great to see you again.
Yes.
And so you have not stopped writing since we saw you last. And you have a new book coming out, and we're going to start with new first. What has been your latest subject?
Well, my latest subject is one that I've been wanting to write for a long time, and I've been working on it the last few years. My 20th book. It's Belle Starr, the true, authentic story of Belle Starr, which has never been told in an honest, straightforward manner. And I am just so delighted that this book is coming out and premiering in June. There have been many books written about Belle Starr, but I'm here to tell you, trying to be courteous to authors before me, this book is really going to be the book that totally defines her. What I've become known for as a writer, but critics and readers and others, is I take subjects, people usually, events, situations, that are so wrapped up in myth and lies and innuendo, just like this, and I carefully, meticulously, and it takes a long time, unwind all of that to expose the true story. And that's what I've done again with Belle, and I'm quite happy with the results.
So she is somewhat a misunderstood figure.
Yes.
Heroine or villain?
Here's the best way for me to handle that, a little shorthand. On the American frontier, in post-Civil War America, there were some black hats and there were some white hats, but many, many of the hats were gray. Belle Starr, I would submit, wore a gray hat. And I would also go a bit further to tell you that compared to other mythologized figures from the West, her hat was lighter gray than, say, Wyatt Earp's, who had quite a lot of crime in his life. Sure. There was a very narrow line at that time, and probably it exists today, but definitely on the frontier, that separated the felonious from the righteous. And people danced on that line back and forth, and sometimes they went on that felonious side and got so far out they couldn't come back, or vice versa. But many people in those times rode as both law officers and as outlaws, sometimes at the same time, sometimes in different times. Some old Missouri outlaws came down here, the Daltons, the Dalton gang. A few of them were deputy U.S. Marshals, but they just weren't making enough money. So they turned to crime, and of course, met their Alamo in Kansas at Coffeyville in that great shoot-up. But this is true of many, many of the outlaws. Now, Belle was, you'd have to say, a bona fide outlaw, but what she wasn't was she never robbed a bank, she never robbed a stagecoach, she never robbed a train. She probably never fired a shot in anger. her problem was two things. She did like bad boys, and she also loved good horse flesh, thoroughbred horses, good Kentucky-bred horses, including some that didn't belong to her.
And that is the one crime that we know there may have been.
Yes.
But she is somewhat viewed as an outlaw, and so perhaps it was more out of necessity or survival than actual malice.
The problem for Belle, and I don't even think of her as Belle Starr. She didn't become Belle Starr till the last 9 years of her life. And you know, she just died a few days before her 41st birthday when she was killed, so it's fleeting. I think of her by her given name, Myra Maybelle Shirley. That was her name, given to her when she was born, 1848, just outside of Carthage, Missouri. But the timing has a lot to do with it, and the geography. She then grew up in that part of Missouri which was greatly interrupted by the border wars that led to the Civil War. This was brutal, brutal fighting. I mean, this is literally brother against brother, father against son, family against family. And it was horrible. And she and her family were caught up in that turmoil. Like many people who came to that part of Missouri, they came out of the South, her parents, with their children and their slaves. They had slaves. People have never talked about this before, but they did. Right. They were slaveholders. And when the border wars started, they were part of the Southern cause. And when the war erupted then, her oldest brother, who she idolized, Bud, who taught her how to ride, who taught her how to shoot, he became a bushwhacker riding for the South, and he was killed by Union forces. And that's when she snapped and made up her mind, I will always give sustenance, I will always support men who are fighting against the establishment and so forth. You know, she
was a real women's liber for back then.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that, you hit it right on the head, because not only in that aspect, but her parents were grooming her to be a Southern belle, as her mother was. And she wanted no part of that either. She was an independent thinking woman who, contrary to a lot of the myth and so forth, was actually quite bright. She did go to the Carthage Female Academy. She studied Latin, Greek, Hebrew. She was very skilled in music, played the piano beautifully, took art. She was altogether there, but she didn't want to be in training to become a dutiful Southern belle wife. You know, that did not interest her at all. She had her own life ahead of her, and she wanted to choose how to live it.
Well, we're going to talk more about Belle and many other people you've written about.
Okay.
After we take a little short break. We're back talking with author Michael Wallis about his new book, Belle Starr, coming out very soon.
Yes, very, very soon. The actual publication date, the official date when people can sell the book, is Tuesday, June 24th. And that's when my publisher is going to launch the book, and we're going to launch it in my adopted hometown of Tulsa. Where else? Where Jeff Martin and his magicians at Magic City Books will have a huge event for the book that evening, 7 o'clock, in the Cascia Hall Auditorium. It's a wonderful venue, and I will be there, and I will have some some companions with me on the stage, including Roger Randall and Connie Cronley and my ace wingman, Ken Busby, and we will discuss the intricacies of Belle Starr, and I think it's going to be a great program. And then I will sign books, and then I will
go away without doing that. That's
well, I know
that is required, right?
You got to sign a lot of books, and then I will go on tour and be out touring. Well, immediately that weekend, I'll be for 2 big events in Fort Smith, of course, and then I'll be on tour through July and August, preaching the gospel of Belle Starr, the truth about Belle Starr.
So let me ask you, what was the moment, or were there a series of moments that led you to, I'm going to write about Belle Starr? What was the inspiration for book number 20?
20.
Yeah.
She had been on my short list a long, long time. Even when I was writing about some of these other frontier figures. So I just decided this was the time for Belle. This was Belle's time in the limelight. And so I already knew, I was quite familiar with her real story, but after doing a lot of research, it became very clear to me that this woman was more mythologized than any of the others I've written about. It was incredible. And so I went to work, and I love to do research, but it's grueling, it's tough. As is writing, you know, people always, 2 things they always say to me, well, you've written so many books now, it must get easier. And I said, well, yeah, let me tell you how easy it gets. And I go back to an old Red Barber, a sports writer's quote attributed to him, who said, yeah, writing's easy. You just sit down to your keyboard and open a vein. And that's what I do. I open a vein. The other thing they always say is, well, now you're coming on 80 years old here. I'm sure you're thinking about retiring. I said, you got to be kidding me. I'm busier than ever. Writers do not retire. We fall over dead on our keyboard. That's it. So.
Don't you think that's true with a lot of creative people?
Oh,
no matter what
definitely.
your creativity is,
Yes, yeah.
you don't stop that
No,
ever.
No. It's true of actors, musicians, writers, poets, painters, anyone. Creativity keeps you going, you know. So as long as I can do that. But there were so many new angles. There was so much new information that I found through this research, spending hours in the National Archives, Washington, the Fort Worth office, and university, and other large museum archives. And then, very importantly, going out. I always go out in the field. I have to go to every place this person was, where they trod. Even if that place is no longer the same, I have to go there. So that meant I went all over so-called Belle Starr country, which include places people don't even realize she lived, including Los Angeles for a couple of years.
What does that do for you? If obviously there's no one still living who would have known her when she was in any of these communities.
No.
What does it do for your creative process when you go somewhere that she was and walk in her footsteps, even if the landscape's completely different? What does that do for your writing and your knowledge?
Well, what it does for me is it does with all these other people I've written with. It brings her to life for me. It really does. And all these people I've written about, I become very attached to them. But being an old ink-stained wretch reporter for newspapers and Time magazine, so I'm always objective. I always let the chips fall where they may. Good, bad, ugly, whatever. but yet I have this closeness to the person I'm writing about, and I want to make sure that in telling their story, I tell it correctly, warts and all. And so that's what I did with Myra Maybelle Shirley. I told her story, and it just brought me great pleasure. The other thing is that I discovered this a long time ago. Often with these people, it was true with David Crockett. It was true with the Donner Party people, that vast assembly of people. There are family associations. There's a family association called the Donner Party Families Survivors, all the different families. There's the David Crockett Association. You have to have DNA to get in these things. And there's the Shirley Family Association, national, international. Anyone with this name of Shirley, which includes my Myra Maybelle and her family. And they are so important because they have the great research, including DNA and so forth. And it was through that family research that I discovered one big new thing in this story that comes out is that Myra not only had half siblings from her father's various marriages before, and she had blood kin, brothers and a sister in her own life, but it turns out she had a whole nother family of half brothers and sisters who were African American.
So you've done an ancestry project here, not just written a book about a historical
There
figure.
are still African American Shirleys living in Texas today.
Huh.
And it all stems from being slave women being impregnated by either John Shirley or his sons. And we have the DNA. And I found that was new research that just broke out after I had already written a first draft. And then I had to go back, and this happens a lot, but there are so many things in this book that are brand new and startling, and I just think it's a damn interesting story.
And isn't it interesting to think about how, obviously that was in the 1800s, but so much of what you've described is very familiar today.
Very familiar.
So it's a relevant story no matter what, and then it's a mythological figure, not mythological, how did you say it?
Mythologized figure.
Mythologized, that was the word you used.
Yeah.
You've written about a lot of figures who you might consider mythologized.
Yeah.
We're going to take another little break, and when we
Okay.
come back, I'm going to put you on the spot about that.
Okay.
We'll be right back. We are talking with author Michael Wallis today, and as we went to the break, I said I was going to ask you a question that puts you on the spot. You ready?
I'm ready.
Of all of the people you've written about, who was your favorite?
My favorite. That's sort of like asking me who's my favorite child, you know? It's a tough one.
Yeah, I was putting you on the spot, didn't I?
It's a tough one to answer. I dearly love everyone I've written about, living and dead. You know, I did a book with Wilma Mankiller. That was the second of my 3 Pulitzer nominations. And of course, I adored Wilma. I can still think about Frank Phillips, oil man, and smell the bay rum and cigars, Billy the Kid, all of them. And definitely Belle, my naughty daughter.
Is that your favorite?
My
Is number
favorite?
20 your favorite?
My favorite is a son of mine named Charles Arthur Pretty Boy Floyd.
Oh.
He would be my favorite if you put a gun to my head. That's what I'd say.
I made you choose.
Yep.
Okay. But I think a lot of people really associate you with Route 66.
Definitely.
That wasn't your first book, but
Second book.
it was the first one that I can remember really connecting with you.
It was huge. It came out in 1990, and we couldn't believe it. On the first national tour, the publisher had to go back to press 3 times. Everybody, New York Times, LA Times, BBC, Good Morning America, The Today Show. It was all over. And people would come up to me and say, "Are you surprised by all this?" And I'd say, well, I think there were other people like me who knew that Route 66 might have been desertified, but most of the road is still there. And I wrote this book because of the people who are still out on the road, dispensing hospitality, growing winter wheat. I know all those people are out there. 85% of the road's still alive. But it wasn't long after that that I did become surprised, because it really got huge. And of course, that book's credited now with sparking the revival of interest. And that led me some years later to work with Pixar. They came to me and said, "We want to do a book about a hotshot race car that's just full of himself, and he gets lost on his way to a race. And he finds himself on an old road, and he doesn't know where he is." There's only one road that could be, and it's your road, Michael. It's the Mother Road.
It's Route 66.
So he brought me out to California. We talked, made a deal. I became their consultant. And I took the creative teams out on the road, back and forth. It was an incredible experience. And they said, "We definitely want you in the film now." You know, so I became the sheriff of Radiator Springs, if you recall, looking for tractor tippers. So, and then my wife Suzanne and I were commissioned, and we wrote a book for Chronicle Books about the making of cars. They do a book about every one of their, and that went on. And then there were 2 more Cars movies. Not long after that, business on stretches of 66 went up 30%.
Yeah. There's a scene in the movie where they're talking about how when the new highway's built, it kind of bypasses where it used to hug and curve with the land. And that's just so evocative of Route 66.
You have just nailed it on the head. That is the scene when I saw the movie by myself in the big Disney studio down in LA. They put me in there by myself, gave me a bottle of water, and played for the first time. I'd seen storyboards and clips, the whole film. When it got to that scene, and that scene is when Bonnie Hunt, when Sally has Lightning McQueen up, and they're looking out, and you see superimposed a map of 66, and she says, "This is the way we used to travel." Right. And you see the highway honoring the road, going around touching places, because it's a crooked road, and crooked roads are roads of genius. And there you see the super slip just cutting through everything. And then James Taylor, Sweet Baby James, sings Our Town. And you see the town the way it used to be when Mater was whole, when everybody was whole. And when that scene came on, I wept, because I knew we had nailed it. I knew this was going to have a huge impact on so many people, and it did, and it has.
And we're down to 30 seconds. I can't stand this, because I would like to keep talking for another hour. So let's make a deal.
Okay.
Because next year is the centennial of Route 66.
Right.
Let's pick this conversation up and talk about centennial. But let's leave with the new book, Belle Starr, released Tuesday, June 24th.
June 24th, 7 p.m., Cascia Hall Auditorium. Public's invited. Come in and be prepared to have a great evening.
And learn things you never knew before about Belle Starr. Michael, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again for another episode of Perspectives.